Listen, Stephen King is the Stanley of horror. Someone's got to say it. I know there are people out there who respect the man, so this isn't for you, but you agree with what I'm saying, because the way that this new generation praises Stan, I feel like he should also, right? This man has so many stories, this man has so many movies and cameos, that as esteemed as he already is, it should be higher. What I'm saying is that this man goes past Edgar Allan Poe. I don't see any reason why we're not studying this man in school like we do Shakespeare. Honestly, I think that a lot of it comes from school boards just being ignorant and misunderstanding the power of the horror genre and the emotions and ideas it can invoke. Like, I don't even think he owns his stories anymore, you know? They're bigger than him. Like Romeo and Juliet, they're timeless. They're going to be remade a dozen times over for centuries the way we still adapt old fables and folktales. So it's kind of ironic that the tagline for this movie is about, something coming back to life, because that's kind of what's happening. But I also kind of see it sort of like a horror A Star is Born, if you will, where each incarnation means something slightly different, but it has its own merits. Let me explain. So supposedly the origins of this story came to King when he lost his cat and even almost lost his son, who was rushing towards a road full of semis. And according to him, he believes this is the darkest book he's ever written, to the point that he didn't even think anyone would pick it up. Like, we're talking about a story where the concern isn't about death being a bad thing, right? He's not really seeing it like the end of life. He's looking at it from an optimistic perspective where death is the end of pain. Now, I've been pretty vocal that I don't mind remakes or reimaginings because to me it doesn't replace the original like people act it does. If anything, it gives it more attention, right? Now there's a whole new generation who realizes they can go back and watch the original. What I do feel is pointless though is whenever it doesn't add anything, you know what I mean? Like whenever they make it clear that the directors don't care and it's just a cash grab. I think the directors are legit for all of these incarnations. The original was helmed by a super successful music video director who hasn't really done much since, but if Mary Lambert came back now, her and Jennifer Kent would go hard. For this new one, they're just as dope. I don't know if you guys saw Starry Eyes, but I highly recommend it because these guys are true horror fans. Like, these guys wanted to make Pet Sematary and got denied the right to make it like years ago, and they were even told they were never going to be able to, and they just sat there like, I will see in a couple years then. I do get why people don't like the change that has happened for the newer one and where they've swapped out which child gets possessed, and I get that directing an older actress makes it easier, but personally, I think that it would have been better to have the little kid, right? Like, I get that they were talking about that they didn't want it to be like Chucky or reminiscent of a bunch of other, possessed kid stories, but it's like, we've also seen creepy little girls. I will always say that it's scarier to deal with a kid who is under the age of 5 because, like, how do I punt him? That said, King said he had no problem with the switch of which kid gets possessed, and he actually gave a great analogy about it, so, if anyone's still up in arms about it, I agree you don't have to like the new one, but you can't argue with the man who wrote the book. In terms of the story, we follow a family who moves to the country after the dad accepts a job there as opposed to Chicago or Boston, depending on which one you're watching. In each incarnation, you kind of question if things would have been better if he just stayed back. Like, we're about to see a guy who, be it pride or whatever it is, this man's continuously making bad decisions, even though he has proof right in front of him. So I'm wondering if this pattern started before all of this, like the decision to actually move his family and not stay back home to handle whatever it was, could have been the starting point. One day at work, Lewis can't save this dude named Pascal, who comes in looking like Two-Face, and he starts having visions of him, haunting him, warning him to stay away from that place. Now, I don't know if it was because it was the 80s, but the first movie decided to have your boy Pascal holding doors open from beyond the grave. He's chilling like season 2 Hannah Baker trying to get attention. I'm glad they didn't do that for the new one. Instead, they kind of hide in Zelda's backstory a bit, or at least visually. Zelda is Rachel's sister who suffered from spinal meningitis. This is not spinal meningitis, and Rachel felt a lot of guilt having to take care of her. In every take, she feels guilty for her death because she either choked on the food that she was giving her and wasn't there to care for her, or was too scared like in the new one where she decided to send up the food in a pulley only for Zelda to reach for it, fall down to her death, and become a sack of bones. It's some jacked up childhood that sticks with you. What's interesting is that no matter how great our movie magic has gone over the years, the 89 version actually has a dude covered up in a bunch of makeup to get the effect they wanted for Zelda. Some have even theorized that the whole thing is a plan orchestrated by Zelda from beyond the grave, and that's why we see Gage dress up like the portrait we saw earlier in the film, but I don't know, I just kind of feel like it's evil coming around in circles. But whether it's an evil burial ground or the Wendigo monster like the original, I think what really makes the movie timeless is how the father goes through all the stages of grief. Let me explain. When Church dies in the most recent movie, it's because of that same dumb road where the semis are playing Fast and Furious for some reason. That cat ends up being more twisted than Rachel's sister. And so his pride comes in, and where Lewis is this fool who is always claiming that he's honest and open and will answer anything for his daughter, he even gets to the point of shutting down his wife when she brings up her spiritual side. But then when it's actually time to be honest, my man just doesn't do anything. There's an obvious theme dealing with burying things that really comes to play with this line right here, one that the directors have fought to keep with each incarnation. And to me, you can compare it to other parables, like when Jesus was talking about the soil and it being a metaphor for people's hearts. King is always putting that stuff in there. And some people, you can even say, are harder to reach than others. Now, Lewis here is clearly not getting any of the advice going his way. Judd, who also should know better, is the one who convinces him to bury the cat, so he wouldn't have to, deal with letting his daughter know. And his daughter was actually the one who discovered the pet cemetery, which a lot of people have questioned why it's spelled differently. It's from the perspective of the kids. I find that to be super creepy. That's the thing with Stephen King's work and why they're so scary. He puts you in their state of mind. Obviously, Winston comes back, but while everyone thinks he's evil, I just think he's a cat. I personally am tired of seeing cats in movies. There have been way too many this year, and I don't even trust them. If cats are supposed to have 9 lives, then how do we know Winston ain't doing all of this? But the idea that he could bury something, and it'll come back, ends up being sewn into Lewis's mind. Remember, a lot of burying metaphors. But unlike the audience who knows they're watching a horror movie, Lewis is like, what the hell is going on? We then get the big incident that happens, again, because of a semi. And I'll just say this about the new one. I get that we can now make things louder with the new design that we have, but man, those trucks are... This movie created a phobia for me in these trucks to the point that I want to ignore my uncle who does that for a living. And honestly, this has been so in my mind ever since I saw this scene. So whether you prefer the creepy kid from the 89 version getting possessed or the 2019 performance, know that Stephen King will always be darker. It's funny every time I see a movie trying to cut back on things because, like in true stories, they always try to add things, they try to fabricate things to make it more Hollywood. Well, with Stephen King, they're trying to cut out as much as possible. Like the death in this movie, in the new one, is a 13-year-old girl getting hit by a truck during a game of hide and seek. The 1989 version is a 5-year-old flying a kite into the street. But the book? The book is a 2-year-old who was running away from his daddy playing a game. Do you even realize the difference in guilt there? Like there's realizing your kid's getting run over while you're kicking back 4 Coors Light at a party, right? It's another if they were playing hide and seek from you, you didn't put him there. But it's so different knowing you chased him into the road. The guilt would literally add weight to your gut. Like something has to physically manifest on his shoulders as he feels the responsibility for killing his son. I'm not done with this. When you drop an ice cream cone and good and well it's your fault, there's a little lump in your throat because you spent your money on it. You know how that lump gets even bigger when you've saved up for an iPhone with your cold hard cash, you ignore the insurance at the Apple store, and then crack it as soon as you get out of the store? Doing that to a kid, I would say, is like 20 times worse. Now, if all of the butterflies, and I mean a lot of butterflies around the set of this new one, didn't kind of allude to the fact that this girl would be wrapped up in a cocoon and, come out as a completely different being, well, neither did Lewis, because he decides to commit this act of unburying his daughter in order to bring her back to that place that'll bring her back. Do you know what has to go into that process? Like for starters, you have to consciously make the decision you want to do this. You find your shovel. You then have a whole drive to convince yourself otherwise. But then you get there, park your car, you gotta walk to the grave, and then you'd think that after, pumping dirt out for the 50th time, you would realize this isn't something you should do. Nope. Homie then has to open the casket, take out the body, wrap the body, carry the body, drive the body, lunge the body, rebury the body, and then go back to drinking Coors Light. Now, don't get me wrong. It's easy to make fun of this guy because we're not in his position. But let's be honest. If one of my loved ones died, I really don't know what I would do in that situation. Like, if I had, if I even knew there was a slight chance that I could see them again. What am I talking about? Bro, if my iPad cracked, I would bury it the next day. And then kill it when it came back as an android. Crazy thing about the book is that these reincarnations are even scarier. Obviously, there's some force controlling all of these replicas, in each take it's the cat luring the child, which lures the dad, so on and so forth. It's a trap! But in the book, what makes them crazier is that they have the kid coming back stitched up like the Bride of Chucky. The kid isn't just taunting them, but verbally abusing them, bringing up old stuff. And the book is creepy because they're not just dumb Frankensteins, They don't come back walking like zombies or creepy beings. they actually have full-on conversations and ideas. It's almost like they're trying to assimilate into society. Like, these dudes want to run for government and destroy us from within. Now, there's one scene from the new movie that I have to give praise to, and it deals with Rachel. Remember how the mom already believes that dad is dead? You know, she's got a little bit more faith than Lewis does. Well, imagine after going to your parents' house to mourn for the death of your daughter, and then after realizing that your husband just pulled an unspeakable lie, your dead daughter who you just buried appears to you. Look at this scene and see how shook she is.
Are you happy, Mommy?
She doesn't know to answer yes or no. Like, she wants to hug her daughter, but she knows that ain't her daughter. Like, this is such an unnatural experience. I would have tried out for another Stephen King role instead.
She doesn't want me here.
No. Mommy just needs time.
It's okay. I don't want her here either.
We then have the endings for each that vary just a little bit. In the original book, you actually have the woods that sort of have a mind control element trying to draw people in. I love the fact that after killing his son, right, who murdered his wife and daughter because he decided to bury him, he still decides to take his wife to the cemetery thinking, hey, you know, I messed up with the kid, but if I bury my wife a little bit quicker, maybe the results will be different. Boy, this ain't no baking class. Like, you don't just take her out of the oven a little bit earlier and think you're going to get different results. The book then ends with Lewis chilling on the porch as his reincarnated wife comes up from behind him, ending, as she calls him, darling. But I love how he didn't even bother bringing his daughter back. He didn't even think about it. It is very obvious who his favorites were in the book. In the 1989 movie, you also get the dad defeating the child demon by injecting him with his med stash from home. But then we get this Scooby-Doo, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for this toddler body clip.
No fair. No fair, no fair.
Imagine a demon nagging like a child. It's so creepy. Even after all this fool still decides to bury his wife, who comes back missing half her face. And he's like, hey, yo, girl, we haven't done it in a while. That's what you get. Finally, in the 2019 version, you know, they all end horribly. Lewis decides to lock Gage in his brand new, Nissan as he goes to deal with his family. But Ellie seizures her own mom to death, drags her body so that she can come back just like her, which then sets up the bait to kill the father, knowing good and damn well that it was going to take both of them to drag Jason Clarke's dad body to the cemetery, thus bringing him back so he is also one of them. As we end the movie on this final shot of the evil versions of the family standing around the car, telling little Gage to unlock it so he can become one of them. In other words, please let the dead stay dead. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Interesting movie. I still think that the book is better. Every single time I go back to watching one of these movies, it makes me want to binge his books even more. And I know one day I will. Obviously, I'm always watching these films, but if there are any other things that you noted from the book that you think are worth standing out, let me know. I like the idea of the possible prequel that's coming out where they want to make a sequel to this one if it does well, but they want to focus on like the Wendigo and stuff, so that should be interesting. I also think it's interesting the way that they revealed things. Look at the screenshot right here where they talked about how they didn't want to spoil it, but they actually noticed that with test audiences, if they knew what it was, they would know better. And I find that funny because, first and foremost, I always make LMEs with the idea that you're watching it afterwards. Like, it's an addition to the movie. I'm enjoying and going through all the emotions all over again. But I get a lot of people who say, hey, aren't you spoiling movies? No. If you don't want to get spoiled, I mean, it says explain, don't watch it. But I know that a lot of people want to know what the movie has. This is just further proof. James Cameron has said this as well. So if anything, I'm kind of helping the movie. Even more than that is the fact that if you don't want to see the video, you don't have to worry about it. But a lot of the LMEs that we do is just rearranging the trailers they already came out. I'm telling you, they release everything. You know the movie before you go see it because that's the mental tactic that they have. However, again, my personal stance, watch the movie, then enjoy the LME. But this screenshot was interesting, seeing how they revealed the spoiler before it came out. But I'm curious to know your thoughts about this movie. Let me know which incarnation you like the best, if you're looking forward to the prequel, what your favorite Stephen King movie is, all that stuff down below. And don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe so that we can find a way to reboot Airborne.